Most people think they already know what the Truman Show is about. Reality television. A man in a fake town who finds out the cameras are on. That's the version you got in 1998. That's the version that became shorthand, the Truman Show delusion, the Truman Show effect, the phrase people reach for when life feels staged. But here's the thing, I rewatched it last month. Not casually, I watched it with a 4th century Coptic manuscript open on the desk beside me, and I could not see the film properly anymore. Now, I know exactly how that sounds. Every few years, somebody announces that a famous film is secretly about an ancient religion. And what they usually mean is that both of them have a bad guy and a journey. That's not an argument, that's a shrug with a thumbnail attached. So let me tell you what I am not claiming. I am not claiming Andrew Niccol did. There's no evidence either of them ever heard of it, and I went looking. This is not a hidden influence video. If that's what you came for, I'd rather lose you now than at minute 20. What I'm claiming is stranger. A group of people in 2nd century Egypt and a screenwriter in 1990s Hollywood arrived at the same architecture, independently. The same maker, the same trap, the same sleeper, the same hidden woman who wakes him, the same seam in the sky. And then they disagree about what's outside, they build the identical prison, beat for beat, and they part company at the door. That's the video. First, the text, what it is, where it came from, why we can date it earlier than you'd think, then the mapping, then the 3 places it breaks. Stay for the third part. The first 2 are the fun ones. The third one is why I made this. My name is Eve Celia. Everything in this video is real. Every quotation comes from a text you can read yourself, and every reference is in the description. The written work is at enlightens.guru. The discount on the books is in the comments, and the podcast is on Spotify if you'd rather listen in the dark. Let's start with the manuscript. It's called the Apocryphon of John, the secret writing according to John, and it was found twice. The famous find is 1945. A jar at Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt, 13 leather-bound codices, around 50 texts buried for roughly 1,600 years. The Apocryphon of John is in that collection 3 separate times. Codex 2, Codex 3, Codex 4. 50 texts in the jar. This is the one they kept copying. But the second find came first. In 1896, a scholar bought a Coptic codex in Cairo, Berlin Codex 8502. It contains the Apocryphon of John too, and it sat there, mostly unpublished, until 1955, 10 years after Nag Hammadi. It had been in a museum since before the First World War, and nobody printed it. 4 ancient copies, 2 versions, a long one and a short one. The manuscripts are 4th and 5th century. The text is older than that. And here's the part that surprises people. We can prove some form of this myth was circulating before the year 180. Because Irenaeus, the bishop from my last video, the one who wrote 5 books attacking these people, summarizes a version of it against Heresies, Book 1, Chapter 29. Barbello, the self-generated one, Sophia's fall, the ignorant lower creator. It's all there in hostile, compressed summary written by a man trying to bury it. Now, I want to be careful because this gets overstated constantly. Irenaeus proves the myth is older than 180. He does not prove this text is. The scholar Fryderyk Weir concluded Irenaeus apparently didn't know the Apocryphon in the form we have. The dating is genuinely argued over. Somewhere between 120 and 180 for the underlying composition is the honest answer. Here's what it says. There is something at the top. The text refuses to call it God because it says the word is too small. It is a unity with nothing higher than it. It cannot be measured. It cannot be limited. Nobody rules over it. Everything that exists is inside it. Below that, there are levels and beings And eventually, there is Sophia. Wisdom, and Sophia does something the text is very precise about. She wanted to bring something into being out of herself, and she did it, in the text's own words, apart from the agreement of the Spirit, and having deliberated apart, alone, without a partner, without permission. And what came out was wrong. The text says her thought did not remain barren, and she produced from herself something that was incomplete. It didn't look like her. She was ashamed of it. She pushed it away outside those places so none of the immortal ones would see it. She wrapped it in a shining cloud. She put a throne in the middle of the cloud, and she left him there. She named him Yaldabaoth. He is the one who makes this world. He does not know where he came from. He does not know there is anything above him. He is sitting inside a cloud, his own mother wrapped around him so nobody would have to look at him. And from inside that cloud, he builds. Now watch what happens when you put the film next to it. The Maker. Yaldabaoth is not the alternate reality, and he doesn't know it. He has power. He genuinely makes the world. He genuinely rules it. But he's a product of something that came before him, and he cannot see past the cloud. Christoph built Sea Haven. He runs it. He lights it. He decides when it rains. And the film puts him in a control room inside a false moon, looking down. The first thing you learn about him is that he is a director, which is to say, a man whose entire authority stops at the edge of a set. And the film gives him a name that does the work for you, Christ of. Not Christ, of Christ. A derivative, the boast. This is the one that stopped me. In the Apocryphon, Yaldabaoth makes a declaration, I am God and there is no God other than me. And the text does something I find genuinely brilliant. It doesn't argue, it lets him refute himself. By declaring this, however, he implied to the angels attending him that there is another God, because if there had not been another, how could he be jealous of another? He gives himself away in the act of asserting, if you're the only one, there's nobody to be jealous of. The burst is the evidence against the burst. And then a voice arises from outside. A voice also came forth from the lofty heavenly aeon. The man exists, and the Son of Man. Now the film. The final scene. Truman has crossed the sea. The boat has hit the wall. He's found the staircase. He's standing at a door in the sky. And a voice comes out of the sky. It's Christoph on the public address, speaking to him for the first time in 30 years. And Truman asks the only question that matters. Who are you? And Christoph says, I am the creator of a television show that gives hope and joy and inspiration to millions. Listen to the shape of that sentence. It begins as a cosmological claim, then it hits the dash, then it deflates into a job title. He gives himself away in the act of asserting. Same move. 1800 years apart. The Apocryphon is explicit that the garden is a trap. The rulers put the man in it and tell him to eat. And then the text tears it apart. Their delight is surely bitter, and their beauty is degenerate, but their delight is trickery. Their trees are godlessness, and their fruit is an untreatable poison, and their promise is mortality. Their delight is trickery, which is a forward review of Sea Haven. Perfect lawns, cheerful neighbors. A newspaper that tells him it's the best place on earth. And every single pleasant thing in it paid for by a sponsor. His wife stops mid-argument to advertise a cocoa mix. The delight is trickery. The film shows you the invoice, the sleeper. This is the strongest one, and I didn't expect to find it. In the Apocryphon, the rulers build a body, and it doesn't work. The text says it was inert for a prolonged time because the 7 authorities could not awaken it. 7 rulers, and in one version, 360 more angels, and not one of them can make it stand up. Think about what that means for a second. The rulers of this world can assemble a person. Bone, organ, nerve, the whole apparatus. What they cannot do is switch it on. They have the schematic and none of the current. The Yaldabaoth is tricked into breathing into it. And what he breathes out is the power he stole from his mother. He empties himself into his own creature, and the instant he does, the body moved and attained strength, and it was radiant. And then the line that is the entire argument of the text, his intellect surpassed that of all those who had made him. The made thing exceeds its makers immediately, because what's actually inside it never came from them. And they notice, the text says they grew envious, that he was free of evil because he was cleverer than they. That is the plot of The Truman Show. A production manufactures a life, and the life turns out to be the only real thing in the production. Christoph says it himself in the last scene, and he says it as a compliment without hearing what it costs him. Truman asks, "Was nothing real?" And Christoph says, "You were real. That's what made you so good to watch." The one authentic thing in the world he built is the thing he didn't build. Now, here's the strangest passage in the whole document, and it belongs right here. In the long version, the text stops telling a story and starts listing. It goes through the human body, part by part, and names the angel responsible for each one. Etruphobe Abram made the head, Menegistroth made the brain, Asterikman the right eye, Thaspamochum the left eye, Hieronomos the right ear, Bissum the left ear. It goes on for pages. And at the end it gives you a total. Here is the number of the angels. All together they are 365. 365 entities, each with a credit for a specific piece of a person. The first time I read it, I thought it was tedious. The second time, I saw what it actually is. It's a crew list. It's the scroll at the end of a production. Grip, gaffer, second unit, except the thing being produced is a human body. And The Truman Show opens with credits. Real ones for the film, then fake ones for the show inside it. Truman Burbank, played by an actress. Marlon, played by an actress. An entire life, itemized with attribution. Neither of them invented that image. Both of them reached for it. Because once you decide a person's world was assembled, the next question is always the same. Assembled by whom? And which part did each of them do? The woman who wakes him. Here the correspondence gets uncomfortable. The Apocryphon has a figure the public domain translation calls the reflection of light. Older translations call her the luminous epinoia, luminous insight. And what she does is very specific. She is hidden inside Adam. The text says she was concealed inside Adam so that the archons would be unknowing. They cannot detect her. She is inside their own product and they don't know she's there. And her function is to wake him. Reflection of light, who dwelt inside him, she roused his intellect. And more than that, she gives him the route. The text says she instructs him concerning the descent of his seed and concerning the way of ascent, where he came from, how to get back. Sylvia, or Lauren, which is the name she's credited under, inside the show, an extra, brought in for a scene, never supposed to speak to him. She goes off script. She tells him, in about 40 seconds on a beach before they drag her away, that everything around him is false and everyone is pretending. Then she's removed and she spends the rest of the film outside trying to reach him. She is the one piece of information that got inside the set without permission. And she's the reason he leaves. Now, there's a detail in the Apocryphon that makes this sharper than I'm comfortable with. You know the story of the tree. God says, don't eat. The serpent says, eat. They eat. It goes badly. That's the version most of the planet grew up with. And in that version, the instruction to eat is the crime. The Apocryphon inverts it. The rulers are the ones who put the man in the garden and tell him what to consume. And then the Savior, speaking in the first person, telling John what actually happened, says this. I was the one, however, who caused them to eat, not the villain. the rescuer. The forbidden act is the rescue, and the one who instigated it is claiming credit. One honest note, because this is exactly where these videos usually cheat. The text does not simply make the serpent the hero. It distinguishes the serpent, which teaches something the text describes in fairly grim terms, from the savior, who is the one at the tree. If anyone tells you the Apocryphon of John says the snake was the good guy, they haven't read it. It says something more precise than that and more interesting. But the structure is unmistakable. In both stories, the act the authorities forbid is the act that saves the person, and the one who instigates it gets punished for it. Sylvia breaks the rules of the production to tell Truman one true thing. She's removed from the set for it. And it works. Everyone else in that town is doing the opposite job. Marlon, his oldest friend, the man he has known since childhood, sits with him on a bridge at the lowest moment of his life and says the most sincere thing anyone says in the entire film, that he would never lie to him. And the film cuts mid-sentence to Christoph feeding him the words through an earpiece. That's the architecture. Every relationship in Truman's life is staffed, and exactly one person in it ever told him the truth, and she was thrown out of the building for it within a minute of doing so. The veil. The Apocryphon on the ruler's method. It was his deception he veiled with a veil. He caused him to be drowsy with a lack of perception. Drowsiness, not chains. The management of attention, which is exactly what Christoph does. Truman isn't imprisoned. He's discouraged. And the method is the cruelest thing in the film, and it's done with a light touch. When Truman was a boy, they needed him never to want to cross water. So they gave him a father, let him love the man, took them out on a boat, and drowned the father in front of the child. Not as punishment, as infrastructure, a phobia installed at 7 and maintained for 23 years. So the ocean would do the work a wall would have made too obvious. Everything else is the same technique at lower volume. Travel posters warning about air disasters, a bus that breaks down on the way out, a wife who mentions a baby every time he says the word Fiji, a newspaper telling him his town is the best place on earth. A best friend on an earpiece fed the exact sentence that will settle him. And the film shows you Christoph writing that sentence in real time. Nobody in that film ever locks a door. They make the door feel like a bad idea, and then they let him guard it himself. And when Christoph sits down for an interview and explains his own philosophy, he says the line that is the closest the film ever comes to stating its thesis out loud: we accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. That sentence would sit in a 2nd century Coptic codex without anyone noticing it had arrived. That's a more sophisticated model of confinement than most prison stories manage, and it's the same one a 2nd century Egyptian text arrived at. The ruler doesn't restrain perception, he veils it. He doesn't stop you leaving. He makes you drowsy. The exit. Truman sails until the bow of his boat punctures the sky. He gets out, he touches the wall, this painted blue thing with clouds on it that has been the horizon his entire life. He walks along it until he finds a staircase. The staircase goes up. At the top, there's a door. The soul in these texts leaves the same way, up through the layers, past the rulers, out through the boundary of the aeon. He walks through. The screen goes dark. And the last thing he says is the greeting he has said every morning of his life, with the morning cut off. In case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. So that's the mapping. 6 correspondences, and none of them vague. The maker who is a product, the boast that refutes itself, the paradise that is trickery, the sleeper who exceeds his makers, the hidden woman who wakes him, the seam in the sky. If I stopped there, this would be a good video. It would also be a dishonest one, because there are 3 places where it breaks, and I've come to think they're more interesting than the 6 places where it holds. Break 1, Christoph is not ignorant. This is the big one. Yaldabaoth's defining trait, the thing the entire text hangs on, is that he genuinely does not know. He isn't lying when he says he's the only god. He believes it. He is sitting inside a cloud that was wrapped around him precisely so he can't see out. The Apocryphon's demiurge is not evil so much as catastrophically uninformed, and the text treats him with something very close to pity. Christoph knows everything. He knows the world outside exists. He's been there. He is not deceived about his own position for 1 second of that film. He's a man who has made an argument to himself and can defend it out loud. And he does defend it, and parts of the defense are not stupid. That's a completely different villain. Yaldabaoth is pitiable. Christoph is culpable. One is a mistake that got out of hand. The other is a decision made by an adult repeatedly on camera. Break 2. There is no gnosis in the film. Gnosis is not information. That distinction is the whole reason the word exists. It isn't learning a fact about your circumstances. It's knowledge of your own origin. Knowing what you are, in these texts, what the sleeper learns is that there is something inside him that the beings who built his body did not put there. Truman learns that the set is a set. That's a fact about the room, not a fact about him. Nobody ever tells him what he is. There's no revelation about his origin, no ascent to a higher order, no return to a source. He gets information, and then he gets a door, which is a smaller thing than gnosis. It's also arguably a more modern thing. Break 3. And this one changed how I think about the film. In these texts, the world outside the false world is more. That's the entire promise. The word for it is the pleroma, and it means fullness. You escape a deficient copy and you arrive at plenitude. More real, more good, more complete. The direction of travel is up in every sense. Truman walks out into less sunlight, into a gray corridor, a beautiful town where everyone knows his name, into a city where nobody does, a wife, a house, a job, into nothing arranged at all. The film doesn't show you what he walks into, and that isn't shyness. There's nothing there. There is no pleroma. There is an ordinary world that is worse in most measurable ways than the one he's leaving. And Christoph, this is the uncomfortable part. Christoph isn't simply lying when he makes his case. There's no more truth out there than there is in the world I created for you. The scholar Jan Kozák describes this inversion precisely. The modern version of the story swaps a real fullness outside for a real lack and puts the fake fullness inside, which means the film is not making a Gnostic argument at all. It's making an existentialist one. Truman is not choosing a better world, he's choosing an authentic one. And the film's entire moral weight rests on the claim that authenticity is worth more than comfort, even when it buys you nothing. No second century text I've read would accept that trade. For them, the point was never authenticity for its own sake. The point was that there is genuinely somewhere better, and you are genuinely from there. Take that away, and you haven't got a Gnostic film. You've got a film shaped exactly like one, but answers the final question differently. So what's actually going on here? I don't think Peter Weir was reading Coptic. I looked for any statement from him or Niccol connecting this film to any of this material, and there is none. Weir's own account of what he was making is a satire about the immorality of television. Niccol's first draft was darker, set in Manhattan, and called The Malcolm Show. The protagonist wasn't even named Truman until somewhere in development. There is real scholarship on this, and I'd rather point you at it than pretend I got there alone. Fryderyk Kwiatkowski wrote a doctoral thesis on Gnosticism in Hollywood with an entire chapter on this film. Kozak's paper on cosmic prison break films is where the inversion argument comes from. Both are free and both are in the description. But notice how careful Kwiatkowski is. His project is reception history. He is not arguing the film contains Gnosticism. He is arguing that audiences use Gnosticism as a lens because it gives them a vocabulary for something they're anxious about and can't otherwise name. And Weir said something in an interview a couple of years ago that I keep returning to. He said the film is pregnant with metaphors, some intended, and some, his word, organic. Organic, meaning they grew there without being planted. I think that's the truthful version of this video. Two people, 18 centuries apart, sat down to answer the same question. What if the world you were handed was built by someone with an interest in you not leaving? And they independently produced the same architecture. Because the question only has so many shapes. Where they part is at the door. The 2nd century answer is, there is somewhere better, and you are from there. The 1998 answer is, there may be nowhere better. Go anyway. I genuinely don't know which of those I believe. I know which one is more comforting. I'm fairly sure it isn't the one the film chose. Now I want something from you. Truman steps through the door, and the film ends. It doesn't show you 1 second of what's on the other side. Weir has never said. So tell me, not what you hope was there, what you actually think was on the other side of that door, and whether he'd have gone through if somebody had told him first. Tell me in the comments, and tell me why. I read them. The written work is at enlightens.guru. The discount on the books is in the comments. The podcast is on Spotify if you'd rather listen in the dark. My name is Eve Celia. I'll see you in the next one.